Hello, I hope that you're doing okay. Here's a story. The Foolish Giant. Many hundred years ago, when there were still giants and trolls living up in the mountains of the far north, a wanderer might easily meet one of them against his will if he strayed far from home. Just such an adventure happened in Lapland to 4 men who had gone out to seek for their reindeer who were lost in the mountains. For 3 whole days and 3 nights they wandered through the snowy wastes and the upland forests without seeing a single house or meeting any living creature. They were nearly dead with hunger and weariness when at last they saw a light shining from a cave at the foot of a mountain whose top was lost in the clouds. Joyfully they hastened to it, expecting to find some human shepherd sheltering there among his sheep. But to their surprise, they found a great opening leading right into the mountain, and when they had walked for a long way by a great wide passage, they found themselves in a gigantic hall with roof and walls of purest silver, so bright that you could see yourself in any of them as if in a mirror. There was no one in the cave, but a great fire burned on the hearth, with a prodigious pot hanging over it, in which the flesh of a whole ox was stewing. And at the other end of the cave, a flock of over 100 large goats, both male and female, were resting peacefully. As they were so desperately hungry, the 4 men helped themselves to the meat in the pot, though they could only do so by pouring out the water and extinguishing the fire. When they had eaten, they hid the rest of the meat to take with them, but they refilled the kettle with cold water. Then they explored the cave still further and found stores of gold and silver and other precious things. But they did not take anything, not knowing to whom they belonged. Thinking, however, that the owner was certainly no ordinary man, the 4 wandering men hid themselves as best they could at the back of the cave, for they were so weary that they were determined to rest there for the night. They had not slept for long, however, before they were woken by footsteps that echoed round the cabin like thunder, and an enormous giant came striding in and stood in the middle, blinking stupidly and muttering to himself. Very odd, I smell strangers, but nobody's here." Then he went to the hearth, lifted the lid of the great pot and looked inside. "Odder and odder," he rumbled, "the beef has stewed right away." In a sudden storm of rage, the giant flung the lid of the pot up to the roof so hard that it stuck there. Then he began tossing the stores at the back of the cave in every direction, and before long he found the 4 terrified men and dragged them out into the middle of the floor. "Ah," growled the giant, "I did smell strangers. This is better than beef." With that he tossed the biggest man into the pot and left him to stew, forgetting that a pot of water does not boil when there is no fire under it. Then he chained the other 3 men to the wall and lay down to sleep while the 4th was cooking. That's horrid. Within a few minutes he was snoring so loudly that the mountain shook and the dead cinders danced on the hearth. As soon as he was sure that the giant slept, the leading man climbed out of the pot of cold water and soon set his comrades free from their chains. When this was done, they loaded themselves with treasure and stole down the passage from the cavern. But what was their horror to find that the giant had closed the end of the passage with a rock so big that the 4 of them could not possibly move it. His 3 friends gave way to despair, but their leader strove to encourage them. "Look, this giant is very foolish," he said. "Giants have few wits, and he has fewer than most. We must escape by trickery, since we can do nothing by strength." So he placed the beef in the pot of cold water and arranged the chains around his 3 companions so as to seem as if they had never moved. Then he hid behind a large hen coop and waited. Presently the giant woke up and strode over to the cooking pot to see how his supper was getting on. "He's gone," he growled angrily. "You there in your chains, tell me where he is at once, or I'll knock your brains out here and now." "Sure, he's still in the pot," the 3 men exclaimed. "Your eyes must be very weak," one of them added. "Why, you couldn't see the beef last time you looked. You thought it had stewed right away. And now you've put the pot on the cold cinders, you couldn't even see that there wasn't a fire under it." "Very odd," mumbled the giant, rubbing his nose. "Yes, I'm getting bleary about the eyes, worse luck." "What you want is a good eye salve," said the man. "That would put you right soon enough." "Eye salve?" said the giant, scratching his head. "I haven't any. Can you make one?" "Oh, to be sure I can," answered the man, "and I'll guarantee that as soon as you get my salve into your eyes, you'll be able to see for 50 miles as easily and clearly as you can for 50 yards. But I warn you that it's a very strong eye salve and smarts horribly when it's first put on." "Oh, never mind about that," said the giant. "Just you make the salve and put it on my eyes as quickly as you can." "Certainly," answered the man, "but you must pay me for it." "All right," said the giant. "You shall have 14 whole days of life. I'll eat your friends first, and you last of all. But you must tell me your name in case I eat you too soon by mistake." "My name is No One," answered the man, and the giant repeated "No One" 10 times so as not to forget it. Then he lit a big fire and unchained the man, who at once set to work to make the eye salve. This he did by melting 5 pounds of lead until it was quite liquid. Then he told the giant to lie down on his back and not to mind however much the salve smarted. And he poured the molten lead into his eyes, and that of course blinded him completely. Very soon the giant realized that he couldn't see at all, and that the stranger must have tricked him. So he shouted at the top of his voice for the giant who lived in the next cave to come and help him punish the villain. "What's the matter?" bellowed the giant neighbour, pausing outside the stone door of the cave. "Who has hurt you?" "No one has hurt me," shouted the giant. "No one has made me eye salve so that I can't see at all. I tell you, no one has done horrible things to me." "So you think it's a joke to wake me in the middle of the night for nothing?" roared the next door giant. "If no one is hurting you, then there's nothing I can do to help you. And if you wake me again for so silly a reason, it will be the worse for you." When he found that he could get no help from his neighbour, the blind giant set about searching the cave for the other men, threatening the most terrible vengeance when he caught them. Soon he realized that the goats were always getting in the way, so he decided to drive them out. But when he had moved the stone which blocked the doorway, he crouched down in the entrance and felt each goat as it went out, to make sure that none of the men slipped out with them. Seeing what the giant was up to, the men hastily caught the 4 biggest billy goats, skinned them, and laced each other up in the skins. As the leader of the men was leaving the cave last of all, the giant stopped him and said as he stroked his back, "Alas, my poor billy goat, you must now wander to the pastures by yourself, for you have lost your master." Then, having let him go to join the rest, he shut the door of the cave and shouted, "Now, Mr. No One, I've got you and your friends in a trap. Now we shall see who really is the cleverest." But the leader of the men was not going to let the giant think that he had beaten them, and as soon as he freed himself from the goatskin, he stood up and shouted back, "Not so, Mr. Giant, for here I am outside, safe and well with my 3 friends and a good deal of your treasure." The giant thought for a long time, and then he said, "Well, well, Mr. No One, after all you are the cleverest, and I bear no grudge, for I admire a cunning thief. So take this ring of mine and wear it to remind you of me." So saying, he pulled a beautiful gold ring off his little finger and threw it in the direction of the voice. The man picked it up and put it on. But the ring was a magic one. As soon as it was on, it began to cry out, "Here I am, blind one, here I am, blind one," and the man could not pull it off his finger however hard he tried. Away he ran, but the blind giant ran after him, following the voice of the magic ring, and the giant ran faster than he did. Then, in despair, he drew a knife, cut off the finger with the ring on it, and flung it into a deep pool, and the ring still cried out, "Here I am, blind one, here I am, blind one." The giant rushed after the voice, fell head first into the deep pool, and that was the end of him. Well, that was quite a bloodthirsty story. The end. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a lovely day or a pleasant evening. Take care of you.